Are you trying to establish your brand as a thought leader? Start a podcast, invite industry experts to be guests on your show, and watch your brand become the prime resource for decision makers in your industry. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to B2B Growth. I am your host for today's episode, Nikki Ivy with Sweetfish Media. I've got with me today Jeff Baskin, who is EVP of Global Partnerships at Radius Networks. Jeff, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Nikki. How are you?
I'm doing well. The sun is shining here in Austin, Texas. I cannot complain. And so Jeff's going to be talking to us a little bit about his experience selling and implementing omni-channel solutions and just his experience in small to medium-sized businesses. But before we get into that, Jeff, I'd love to hear just a little bit of background on you and what you and the folks at Radius Networks have been up to these days.
Sure. Well, first I'll start with thanks for having me, first of all. And I'll start real quick on just some quick background on myself. Sure. I had the great opportunity to kind of grow up in the business world back during the .com boom and also the .com bust. So I was able to see a lot of things that worked and a lot of things that didn't. I was with a particular startup that started about 1999, and we quickly, and I would like to say that we thoughtfully found strategy that got us to grow very quickly. But in fact, we stumbled on several things that helped us grow. The smart thing that we did there was we kept at it. We found some email marketing opportunities. We found some other marketing opportunities online where we were able to grow our business very, very quickly. And this was actually during the .com bust, about the 2002 timeframe. And during that time frame, we went through a lot of undulations where we were able to see. And as I mentioned, I received my MBA during this portion of my career where I was with a startup of 8 people. We found this very quick growth. We were number one on the Inc. 500 in 2004. Later that year, went public. 3 years later, went through a Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And within 6 months of that, came back out of that looking very good and with a very, very good company. So saw a lot and then later sold that company a few years later. So did very well, pretty much saw everything there was to know in the business, which has really helped my later career because when you see both the good and the bad and things that you've done and mistakes that you've made and the good things that you've done, it certainly helps you make better decisions later on in your career.
For sure. Thanks for sharing that with us. I think a lot of the folks that listen to the show and that certainly I talk to being here in Austin, which is of course a startup hub, I hear the first part of that story, right? Which is, the becoming one of the fastest growing companies and then going public. And then we don't often hear what happens after that. So it's really, really interesting to hear that's how you got your MBA. It reminds me of something Beyonce says, which how many times do you get to say that a day, right? Well, she says that, she got her education on the stage, and it sounds like that's something that you were able to do. So it's really, really, like I said, fascinating to hear that second half of what happened.
I think you'll probably hear similar stories of people that kind of really started their career in a startup environment and it's kind of what I've enjoyed over the course of my career, which is I've always been with kind of these early to mid-stage companies and really helping them grow and getting from zero to a lot very quickly. And I've kind of, learned those things along the way, but it's a very interesting place to start. You're not at a very large corporation where you have 2 years of training and you move up the ladder. You're kind of thrown into it and you've got to learn on your own. And a lot of times that helps you kind of get things done faster.
Yeah, for sure. I know a lot about that. It's just being thrown into it and figuring it out. That's again we talked about offline. That's on the label at a startup. But talk a little bit about how the way you earned your MBA, as you phrase it, which I love, and the things that you experienced going through the sort of beginning, middle, end, and aftermath of that first experience that you shared. Talk about how that informed your approach when you joined your current role at Radius Networks and what you brought to the team with that experience.
Sure. Yeah. And I'll start. I'll give a quick background on Radius Networks. So we're a location technology company helping retailers, quick service restaurants, sports stadiums, other large venues with kind of proximity marketing and technology and great use cases. And we get to do really, really cool stuff like work with McDonald's and their Experience of the Future program and help with their table service solution, work with Disney and a lot of their Bluetooth initiatives that they have in all of their lands and worlds. So we get to work with a lot of really cool things. And one of our latest initiatives is our flyby curbside solution, which is really it's at a very cool stage in the omni-channel phenomenon with Amazon coming in, being obviously the largest e-commerce player, but also now buying Whole Foods and Amazon Go stores. There's a lot of large grocery stores and a lot of fast food chains and a lot of other retailers that are shaking in their boots a little bit, trying to figure out how do I compete with Amazon that's now kind of getting into our brick and mortar space. And a lot of them have done very well in that by knowing that they've got to include technology within their stores and have an e-commerce solution. And that's why you have seen Target and Walmart with some of the highest e-commerce growth out there in the last year, even beating out Amazon as far as growth percentage over the last 12 months. And then you see grocery stores like a Kroger and Albertsons putting in huge amounts of technology. And the technology that Radius Networks is really looking to put into these retailers and where we're able to help them is knowing where your customer is and being able to act on that. So a great example is with a curbside pickup solution where delivery and curbside pickup are the rage and how a lot of these retailers are trying to close the gap on e-commerce or on Amazon. And the idea is if I can tell them that, hey, Nikki is on her way to the grocery store and she's going to be there in 10 minutes. And I'm now going to pack up all of her groceries and I'm going to be waiting with a cart at the door when she's there. And then we can provide alerts along the way. And then we can tell that. So it's very, very convenient for the customer as they're literally pulling up. And the idea is that you're barely slowing down and they're throwing groceries in your trunk, but also for the staff, which is there's a huge labor expense when it comes to omni-channel. That's one of the biggest blockers to grocery and QSRs doing these things is the labor expense. So if we can make that much, much more efficient, then we can do a really good job of helping them succeed in kind of these omni-channel strategies that they're trying to do for both curbside and delivery and extending their reach from their brick and mortar stores.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. I think like as an industry, what's starting to happen, what you just reminded me of when you were saying that is a lot of the things, specifically when it comes to selling and marketing, a lot of the things that B2C has been sort of keyed in on for a long time in terms of how they're reaching people and how they're leveraging technology. B2B is just now starting to do that when it comes to how people think of them, how the people who buy from them think of them and how they can influence that. And so to hear this story about where, what you guys are doing as a B2B company are supporting what these other B2C organizations are doing it's pretty fascinating. So what I'm interested in hearing next is what you think is on the horizon for that sort of thing. What's the future? You can talk about what that means for specifically Radius Networks, but in general too, as far as where the industry is going to take this technology that you talked about.
Yeah, I think it's like I said, it's a really interesting time because I think there's innovations that are happening literally on a weekly basis where you see the Amazon Go stores and are those going to work? Are people going to react to that well? How does that affect other people that are in the industry and are other people trying to do that? But I think where the real focus is for a lot of these retailers is figuring out a way to take advantage. The one advantage that they have over Amazon is that they already have retail stores in the wild where an Amazon is kind of coming into it and kind of buying Whole Foods and gaining retail ground and also now creating their own brand and getting real estate. But how do I actually use my store and then expand that into e-commerce and make a really good experience for the customer? Because I think if you would ask a lot of people years ago, they said at some point Amazon's taking over the world and there's not going to be any retail stores because no one's going to ever want to go to a store. Well, with technology, we're making the customer experience for them to actually want to either come into the store or go to the store because it's more convenient for them. So to answer your question a little bit better, I think you see specifically in the grocery space, you see a company like Instacart, which has raised about $1.4 billion last time I checked, and they're doing in-store delivery. And a lot of the grocers are growing slightly concerned about that because they're taking or they're essentially handing over their customer to Instacart. So they're trying to pull back from that a little bit and saying, hey, if I'm not doing delivery, how can I do curbside pickup, or can I do this on my own? And like I said before, there's a large labor expense involved in that. So how do we make these types of things really easy for them? And one way of doing that is making a good experience for the customer, as well as making it much more efficient for the staff.
For sure. It's this whole concept of sort of having the shift from focusing on how can I provide value, but more so, how can I remove friction, right? How can I make it a frictionless experience for both the folks doing what you're doing and for the end user, the consumer?
Yeah.
At the end of the day.
Yeah. And in today's environment, a lot of, if you're focusing on the grocery market, they have curbside pickup, but it's a very manual process for the customer and it's a very manual process for the staff. So today, if you place an order for a grocery store, they want you to, hey, give me a call when you're 10 minutes away and text me or call me when I'm there. And there's a lot of hardware that might be there when you get to the store. It's over the intercom, tell me when you're here. And then they've got to go package everything up. And then next thing you know, it's 12 minutes later. Well, if I'm sitting in a grocery store, I'm probably not going to be too happy if I'm waiting 12 minutes for my groceries. I may have gone in and been able to do some of that on my own. But in today's world where people are getting upset that, it takes 3 minutes for an Uber to come pick them up, they're looking for convenience. Time is extremely valuable. So if retailers can figure out a way to make it very timely for their customers, but also again, efficient for their staff, those retailers are going to win. And if they can figure out how to make that experience good.
Yeah, I love it. Because it's tough to sort of, I hadn't heard a use case like you presented here today for how to bridge that gap, right? How to make it this seamless experience for the customer and frictionless for your customer, the other business. But so I'm extremely informed by the things that you've shared today. But what I want to pick your brain a little bit. What informs you? What learning resource, be it a book you've read, a blog, a podcast, have you read or consumed lately that's just really speaking to you, exciting to you, or maybe informing your approach over there?
I do. I would say I do a few things. I read all of the kind of the industry publications on a daily basis that I'm interested in or that I'm focusing on. You need to be very knowledgeable
because our listeners are going to want to know so they can.
Okay. Yeah. So in the grocery space, we're looking at like a progressive grocer who is providing a lot of information on technology that's happening in the retail grocery space, but also on a lot of other different topics that will kind of arm me with when I'm talking to a grocer that I can do that for. Internet retailer is a good one that is giving me a lot of e-commerce perspective on for any e-commerce player. And most of these e-commerce players also have retail stores now. So there's a lot of information about them there. And then there's some other industry folks that I listen to as well. Some of the other stuff from just a pure education standpoint. There's another podcast outside of yours, which I love, which is How I Built This. And it's a great way to look at my experience kind of in the startup world and looking at that, and then how some of these great companies that you see today have been built and how they started. And I think a lot of them are fascinating stories to see how they started, what were their inflection points, what were all their pain points specifically that they went through, and all of them have seen that, and then kind of a lot of the success stories around that. So that's one as well.
A lot of other folks that got their MBAs from the School of Hard Knocks and these startup streets, it sounds like. Thanks for sharing that with us. So I know folks are going to want to learn more from you, follow along with what you guys are doing. How can people connect with you, Jeff?
I'm on LinkedIn, Jeff Baskin. I'm on Twitter at Jeff Baskin1. And via email, my email address is jeff@radiusnetworks.com.
Sweet, concise. Well, thanks so much, man. I wish you guys so much luck, and thanks for sharing your story, and you have a good one.
Great. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
We totally get it. We publish a ton of content on this podcast, and it can be a lot to keep up with. That's why we've started the B2B Growth Big Three, a no-fluff email that boils down our 3 biggest takeaways from an entire week of episodes. Sign up today at sweetfishmedia.com/big3. That's sweetfishmedia.com/big3.